Hello, everybody. Welcome to the new episode of Minutes with Ming. It's Ming Li Chao here. I'm here with a recurring guest, Brandon Martin, and he's one of my favorite conservationists. And how are you, Brandon? Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm doing great. Just hanging out in these uncertain COVID times.
Hmm. But today you're here as a private citizen, so that opens up a lot of conversations that we can talk about. At first, let's talk about your passions outside of Ulinks and see where we go from here.
Yeah. So I'm obviously, like Ming said, I'm very interested in conservation. I've been involved with a number of conservation authorities through work. And ever since high school, I've been involved in a number of conservation efforts through social justice and environmental causes in high school and university. So yeah, that's kind of me. Mainly specialized in aquatic systems, as you can see by
Mm.
the lovely lake picture that I took behind me. This is one of the lakes that I worked on recently. This is Gull Lake in the Halliburton Highlands. So yeah, mainly focused on aquatic conservation, but also kind of generally more broadly and just all environmental conservation. So
Mm. I can tell one of your favorite things to study is benthics. I'm just wondering how rewarding is that for you?
fairly rewarding. It's been an interesting journey for me. I kind of stumbled into it.
Mm.
In university, we had an applied ecology course where I was kind of introduced to benthic macroinvertebrates. And then through one of my co-op terms at Waterloo, I worked with the Conservation Authority, helping them identify benthics. And I found that rather interesting. So later on in my academic career, I took a field course that involved receiving my Ontario Benthos Biomonitoring Network certification, which is kind of the standard for Ontario for benthic macroinvertebrate collection, which are basically, just to explain to anyone who doesn't understand what benthics are, they're the small organisms that live on the bottoms of lakes and streams,
Mm-hmm.
both freshwater and marine. I focus on freshwater, obviously, because I'm in Southern Ontario and we
Of
don't have
course.
any saltwater down here. But yeah, so yeah, it's been an interesting journey. It's definitely one of my passions. But yeah,
Mm. I can tell because you're like obsessed with benthics and like not obsessed per se, but like very passionate about benthics and invertebrate. Like I feel like you have collected a lot of data on your end and stuff. But I was wondering also, how does that benefited you from your overall career path? Like where do you see your career going from this particular point, and how does that well uh, for the future?
well, it's definitely a difficult career path.
Mm,
I've been actually fairly lucky over the past year to have secured a basically full-time permanent position. Most of the career prospects for young graduates are fairly limited or at minimum seasonal. There's usually a lot of them. A lot of consulting companies will hire people who have benthic specialties.
mm,
Conservation authorities do a lot of that. Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change.
mm,
Sorry, no, Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks now. The
mm,
fourth name change in like 3 years. Um, they hire a lot of people who do benthic stuff, and they're kind of the overseer of benthic biomonitoring in Ontario.
mhm,
But yeah, it's very sporadic work, especially to start off with, unless you become like a PhD in benthic entomology.
mm,
But yeah, I've been very lucky to have stayed with Ulinks for this long. They've been very basically got lucky.
mm,
A lot of people in this field will jump around from job to
mm,
job for about 5 to 10 years doing seasonal contracts and the like. But so I don't really know where my future is going. At the moment, I'm still with Ulinks,
mm,
but considering that we're a non-government organization, not-for-profit organization who relies heavily on donations and grants in these uncertain times, money isn't always available. So who knows? In a year or two, I might be back out looking for work. So
mm.
And who knows where
Well,
that'll be.
and before we get anywhere, I want to congratulate you on your possible wedding.
Oh,
And
thank you.
sorry, I don't mean rude by anything possible, but I mean like because of COVID, everything is throwing a whirlwind of uncertainties,
Yes.
and to me, it's just um, I just want to congratulate how headstrong you are going through with the process, even amidst at least the planning aspect pertain. Um, but congratulations! I think you guys are a very cute couple, and
Thank you.
I don't know if you know this, but you have my full blessing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would just say to anyone, if you're thinking about asking your significant other to marry you during the pandemic, save yourself some hardship and don't, because it's really hard to plan a wedding when you don't know what restrictions are going to be in place
Mm-hmm.
2 months down the line. So
Mm-hmm.
unless you're planning on having like a micro wedding somewhere, I would just wait. If you can wait, wait.
Mm. Or like a wedding in like a group camping site or something, like a ceremony at the group
Yeah,
camping site, or it's like just
yeah,
something like because right now because of COVID, there's too many uncertainties. Like even with you guys, even though that for work and stuff, it's very hard to even find work because people want to work at home. They don't want to like because of the dangers and stuff, potential
yeah,
dangers, and the new variants
yeah.
and how I know that it hasn't been affecting you particular, but like I feel like it has broader implications to like new graduates as a whole.
For sure. So we've actually been fairly lucky with the timing of when our sampling and stuff can
Mm,
occur.
mm,
So when we sampled last year,
mm,
we sampled in the fall. Thankfully, numbers had decreased and some restrictions were lifted.
mm,
So that allowed us to go out and sample. But I remember last summer I was talking with a number of the people who were applying for our summer position
mm.
to help me out. And it is like we were one of the few places offering employment, albeit it was the beginning of the pandemic, so people didn't
Yeah.
know how to deal with stuff, and they were still kind of getting organized on their end. So having summer students and stuff wasn't
Mm,
really super viable for a lot of employers.
mm,
But even still, like especially now with the new restrictions and stuff, things are going to be harder this summer. So
mm. That sucks because like yeah, the vaccines are coming, but like it has been impacted a lot of us about our private lives too. Like we have to stay inside and stuff, and
yeah.
only go out for essential things and stuff. Um, I just not from your work. How hard has it been for you as a science communicator, uh, in the midst of everything like that?
Um, it's been okay.
Mm,
Being a science communicator is always challenging.
mm,
There's new challenges that come up every year, every month. So I would say at the beginning of the pandemic, it was a lot more challenging just because a lot of people weren't necessarily focused on the things that we were focused on. So we were thankful. As you can clearly see by my setup, I
mm,
work from home.
mm,
Um, so we were fortunate enough to have that kind of
mm,
capability already.
mm,
So we kept trucking ahead like basically
mm,
nothing had happened and just kind of trying to plan our health and safety policies around the new
mm,
disease that we had to deal with. Um, but it was definitely challenging, mostly just getting a hold of people and getting people interested in what we were doing.
mm,
But I think also we also lucked out because we work in cottage country, and there was quite a flight of people from the city to the cottages over the summer, even in their early spring, which much to the chagrin of the locals here, they did not
mm,
appreciate that
mm,
when everyone's being told to stay home.
mm,
But we kind of lucked out there because a lot of people were at the cottage, so they were nearby, and they wanted to actually know what was going on because they had a bunch of spare time now. So
mm,
initially it was difficult, but now it's actually basically business as normal. So
mm,
we kind of lucked out. But I think overall, kind of looking at the industry in a broader sense,
mm,
it would probably be a lot more difficult for science communicators to kind of pivot
mm,
and get people's attention
Mm-hmm.
when everyone is hyper focused on the virus. So
Mm. That's a very interesting point. And I feel like it's very important for science communicators now, especially there's a lot of uncertainty with COVID and stuff, and there's a lot of like terms and wording that as a public that we're not aware of and stuff, and we need like full context beside that. In the simplest term, like um I remember when I was in university, I wrote a paper on how to communicate effectively. uh it was in our one of our biosphere courses as a science communicator, and as my research shows that it's very hard because there's a lot of information you have to sift through, and trying to understand it in a way that's very educational but very not too boring. Like you don't want to be slammed with all the facts. Like,
mhm.
and I feel like the social media science communicator, like people that uses like Snapchat, Twitter, or YouTube or TikTok, I think they're doing a really good job trying to, especially during a pandemic, trying to deliver a lot of scientific data into um, like the public's hands. But even though they're valiant effort, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that still gets lost in translation when it comes up in the news and stuff, like how news interpreted science and stuff. Yeah, it's fun to bring people on, like experts online, but you only have 5 minutes to, or like let's say 10 minutes to explain your entire research or the entire modeling of your particular sector. I think it's extremely hard for like
Yeah, yeah, and I think my kind of idea behind that, albeit my work does not put people's life potentially
yeah.
at risk. So talking about lake health isn't as dire as talking about someone's health, but I
mm,
think my kind of view is basically just telling people what recommending what they should do. So for
mm,
example, for lake health and stuff, like obviously we're going to say like you should get your septic tanks inspected. If they're broken, you should probably fix them because that is
mm,
going to cause a lot of pollution in the lake. If your septic
mm,
tank is not working properly, you're not going to
mm,
have a nice clear lake like this anymore.
mm,
Just kind of stuff like that. And a lot of people, that's basically all they want to know. They're just like, you're the expert, tell me what I need to do type thing. And then they just trust you. Um, it's kind of unfortunate to see that trust be eroded a lot
mm,
lately. But I think it is a very important thing to have
mm,
and to remember is
mm.
that each person isn't an expert on everything.
No.
Like you can have a broad set of knowledge and skills, and that is important, but you can't be making decisions that go against what experts are saying. I
Mm,
don't think that, like, obviously, like, don't blindly trust them, but I think there needs to be a lot more trust than there is now.
mm,
I think that's where
mm,
a lot of the issues that we're seeing are arising
mm.
from.
And I feel like, as we say, that experts are also humans and they're
Yep.
not perfect. They can get things wrong. Like, let's just, like, they're not impervious to mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Even in journal articles, there's mistakes that
Oh yeah.
was caught and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And some could be just, unknown, like, totally accident. Or some of it is more like, I want to prove my point as soon as possible, and stuff gets lost. Important processes get lost in the dialogue or in the paper when you're doing the experiment. Like that happens a lot. And don't get
Mhm.
me, especially like I understand that people in the past, like, people are motivated by money. Remember in the past that tobacco scientists like was paid by the tobacco company in the 1930s or something, saying smoking has no effects and stuff on the like health risk, but then that's completely false and stuff. So like these, I feel like little things like that would contribute to like the mistrust of the public and stuff. over time. Not like, I'm not saying that we should distrust the public, but we should sorry, the scientists, but there's little things like that does pop up in our history that we should acknowledge, but still trust when something really bad's going on without any political bearing.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's still going on. Like a lot, if you look at a lot of the journal articles, I'm not a health expert, so don't take my word for this, but based on what I've seen and heard, if you look at a lot of the journal articles that are written on like diabetes and a lot of stuff like that, a lot of them are paid for by the sugar industry. So of course they're going to say slightly better things. Like they're not as bad as like the example you gave with tobacco industry paying and basically saying smoking is healthy for you. They're not saying that. They're just saying that other things, like it's not as bad as this other paper said. It's still bad, but it's kind of up to the individual to decide how much sugar they have, type thing. And there should be
like, let's be clear, like I don't like, not everyone, let's not use this minute point to discount everything.
No,
like
yes.
like let's to be clear, there are outliers in the system and people are not perfect, but let's to be clear that this is not to say, oh, we're wrong about everything. This is saying we're wrong about this particular thing. Let's just say.
Yes.
And
don't throw out all science, because some science is bad.
Yeah,
like a lot of early science. I'm gonna probably anger a lot of people by saying that. A lot of early scientists were going against the Catholic Church, and like we didn't, or a lot of early scientists were also Catholic priests at the time, and we actually still use some of the science that they started centuries ago. Like, for example, one of the instruments that we use to measure water clarity is called a Secchi disc. It was invented by a priest. It does what it is intended to do. So like, just the fact that it was made by the Catholic Church doesn't necessarily mean that there's a conflict of interest there, because especially way back when, the Catholic Church was like, nope, the Bible is the Bible. This is that. There's and nothing else.
And not be all.
Yes. So like, obviously, even some of these articles, like we were having this issue where we were discussing taking a grant from Enbridge, which is an Suncor, which is an oil company that's based in Alberta, to help fund our lake program. And initially everyone at our meeting was like, no, we can't do this. It's the oil companies. They're going to be influencing what we say. And having had experience with a grant from a previous, it was a natural gas company, it was Enbridge, but having another fossil fuel industry grant provider, they don't always do that. So it's if it helps you stay afloat. So if our option is take the lifeline from Suncor and continue the program, or don't and lose the program as a result, I'd rather go with Suncor and just be like, yeah, we're going to say that our data is climate change is not good for these lakes, and that is having an impact on all the lakes. So,
well, like, you brought up a good point. Like, I feel like we should be truthful to our data, no matter what, like, because, data don't lie. So if you take the data properly, the data don't really lie, but you can I think it depends on your interpretation of data, how that goes and stuff. That plays a big part of the scientific process. It's how you interpreted the data and what method are you using to interpret the data, like,
and collect
and collect those specific procedures to make sure that is replicable and stuff. Like, that's also pretty important. Like, there's as you know, when we write, like, if there's a journal article, there's a page where it's filled with, like, what potential things like human error or like that kind of can influence the data, but how does it affect the reproducibility of the data? And that's the key. Like, if data cannot be reproduced to a certain outlier, to a certain extent of this, within a statistical analysis within a certain parameter, how can we interpret that specific data then, right?
Well, and I think actually that's a good point. So um, that is something that science dictates,
Mm,
but in reality, for
mm,
example, that isn't necessarily how things always work. So, using an example of the lakes that I deal with, um, the bugs that we look at, their composition and what their numbers are can be influenced by any number of things. So it's a very like lakes are very, very complicated. So we kind
mm,
of boil it down to if you have these bugs, your lake is generally healthy because they're usually less tolerant to traditional sources of disturbance. So like um, increases in temperature, lower dissolved oxygen, pollutants,
mm,
stuff like that. If those are in the water, they're not there. So if they're not there, we can say your lake isn't healthy. If they are there, you can say your lake is healthy. But there are some things that can just happen that aren't included in that, where one year you can have none of them, and then the
mm,
next year they're back. So what does that tell us? Is like, okay, well, like, is the lake healthy? Because this year it wasn't, but then the
mm.
next year it is.
Is
And
it
so
because you didn't collect enough sample to cover these specific points, or is it because we just don't know? That's
we
the.
just don't we just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm,
based on our sampling protocols, um, in theory they should be reproducible
mm,
because we go to the same sites every year
mm-hmm.
around the same time. So we should be expecting to see relatively the same numbers. And this is if people look into the work that I've done in the past,
Mm,
this is why every single report that I have my students put out
mm,
says that we need a 3-year baseline because just
at
natural
least.
variability, at least,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
preferably more. But
Yeah.
all I can get from most of these associations is 3. So,
Okay.
so they
Three is
want the
better than
data
one.
now. It is much better than 1 because I get a lot of the lakes that we had last year. It was just like, yeah, your lake is bad.
Mm,
That's why you want 3 years because then you can pick up the good years as well.
mm,
Um, but yeah, it's in these very complicated systems, it's very difficult to kind of reproduce things,
mm.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong.
No.
So, like for example, if we have um, if we have a year where we have only gross leeches and worms and like the bad bugs that show that there's probably something going on in the water, but the past 4 years there's been good bugs, that doesn't necessarily mean that the lake is all of a sudden bad.
Mm,
If after that all of the bugs that we get are just the bad worms and leeches, then yeah, there's been a shift somewhere. But like if the next year all the good bugs are back, something happened and we don't really necessarily know what,
mm,
because we can't say for certain it was the landowner that we're measuring the land adjacent to, or it
mm,
was the septic tanks, or it
mm,
was a heavy rainfall or a stormy day or
mm,
whatever.
mm,
It's just we can point out that there is something and we understand the limits of that. So that's the
mm.
important piece, is it's like we are doing science
Mm-hmm.
because we understand the limits of what we're doing, but
Mm,
it's a very complicated system and there are a lot of variables
mm-hmm.
within that system that we can't necessarily account for.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah.
I I feel like you brought up a very good point about a lot of variables in the system and stuff. My question to so play on that aspect is, um, how does get how does the importance of getting concrete data, and do you find that in a lot of the reports that you're showing there's some activism in it? Like, how does activism play a part in terms of variability, like data, and how do you reconcile that?
um, so it's a bit complicated,
Mm-hmm.
but it is something I do think that we can do advocacy with the data that we're collecting
Mm,
specifically for our program. This isn't necessarily a blanket statement for
mm, mm,
all research or all science that's being done, but specifically for us, and specifically for environmental monitoring, we don't just go out and monitor to collect data.
Mm,
We go out and monitor to better understand what's going on around us.
mm,
And so in this instance, we're sampling lakes that have cottages on them. And so there are families here. Some of these families have been here for not centuries, decades, not quite that long. Actually, there might be a few. There might be a few cottages in
mm.
Halliburton that have been there for over 100 years.
Oh, the structural integrity. Oh my God. I'm trying
Yeah,
to
yeah. They're pretty small.
think.
They're pretty small and they're really old. But yeah, they definitely don't make them like they used to. But anyway, so some of these families here are very committed to ensuring that their lakes stay healthy because
Mm,
one, they enjoy swimming and boating in these lakes and they don't necessarily want to be impacted by
mm,
pollution or the big
mm,
thing recently has been algae blooms.
mm,
They're caused by a number of different things. So a lot of them are worried about algae blooms impacting their ability to enjoy their
mhm,
recreation time at their cottage.
mm,
And some of it is monetary. Like I'll be blunt, like a lot of these people don't want to see their cottages lose value because their lake becomes unboatable or unswimmable. Um,
incentives. Hmm.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's true, right? Like if I had a house, I wouldn't want to see it lose value, right?
No.
So it makes sense. But so the individuals that we're working with have this incentive.
Mm,
We're removed from that, so we don't necessarily completely rely on them, either financially or for the projects. We can just go out and do this. But I think the important part is that what we're doing has a cause. So I'm
mm,
just not going out and collecting bugs and just being like,
mm,
yeah, here's the data.
mhm,
I am doing it for a reason because we
mhm.
want to protect the
Yes.
the
Mhm,
environment here. And so
mhm,
if the data says the site is degraded, well, what
mhm,
can we do to help improve
mhm,
the site? Can we restore
mhm,
it? If the data is saying everything's fine,
mhm,
great. How do we keep it that way? Are
mm,
there bylaws that we can pass
mm,
to make sure that the environment doesn't get degraded and stuff? So I think
mm,
I think there is a place for advocacy in
mhm,
science. I
mhm.
don't think it should trump the scientific process,
No, no, of course
but
not.
we need to do this for a reason,
Mm,
right? And in this case, I think that reason is
protection.
to protect and to
Mhm.
advocate for the protection of the environment.
Given that the data reflects that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it
Yeah,
will
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
either way, if it says the lake's bad or good, if the
Mhm.
lake's bad, okay, can we fix it? Do people
Mhm.
want to fix it? If they don't want to fix
Mhm.
it,
Then
okay, that's their lake. They can do what they want
mm.
with it, right? Like
Mhm.
it'll impact the people downstream and it'll
Mhm.
impact their property values, but then they
Mhm.
can do something about it, right? So like
Mm.
either way, the advocacy works. It's
Mm.
kind of great, honestly, because
Mm.
we know the answer is yes, advocacy,
Mm.
yes,
Mm.
it will work.
Mhm.
But yeah, so
Hmm. But like what I'm trying to say is when there's data supporting advocacy, it works. What about um, have you found instances where they just want like there's a lot of um, what's it called uh, like people wants like a lot of really biased assumptions. Have you find like in not just in your work, but like have you seen like just like an off back question, like have you seen uh, obviously bias in terms of the data interpretation or advocatism, like showing that question out there.
I don't think that I've specifically seen it.
Okay.
Um, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I'm sure
Mm,
people would use that because there's that famous, I think it was Mark Twain.
mm,
There's three lies, damned lies, and statistics.
mm-hmm,
So with any data, if you're analyzing it, you're using stats,
mm,
and you can manipulate it to show what you want, basically.
mm, mm.
So that's part of the reason why we're really pushing for, and I'm specifically very for open data.
Yes, yes.
So that way, if people want, they can go and look at the raw data. Those numbers, unless they're collected improperly,
Mm-hmm,
usually aren't biased,
mm,
right? So, like for example, us, you can, well, not at the moment, but soon you'll be able to go online and download our data set. So if you
mm,
think that we're not looking at our data properly, you can
mm,
run your own analysis on it,
mm.
and then we can talk about it and figure out what went wrong.
Interpreted. Mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Like that's
So
very fair, actually.
yeah, And I think that's why there's this, especially for there's a big push for
Open source.
open source data, especially in Canada and in
Mm,
the water
mm,
water governance and water monitoring
mm,
realm, if you
mm-hmm.
want to call it that. There's a big push to really make sure that all of this data is open, because we all rely on water. It's extremely important in all of our lives,
Mm.
regardless of whether you think it is or not. Like I drink water every
Nestle.
day.
Nestle.
I drink tap water. It's perfectly safe. It tastes
Mm,
good. If it
mm.
doesn't, get a Brita filter. It's
Yes.
fine.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's if people are going to interpret data incorrectly,
Mm.
and they may be doing that with a
Unknowingly
bias. Yeah,
or
they may,
unknowingly.
or unknowingly. Yeah, they might
Mm-hmm.
be doing it purposefully, or they might just
Mm-hmm.
have the wrong idea. So,
Mm.
for example, for my own personal life, this past year, we were using an index, which is a statistical model to interpret the data from our
Mm-hmm.
benthic
Mm.
collections,
Mm.
that was developed for streams and rivers.
Mm.
It wasn't meant for use in lakes.
Mm.
And I knew this. And so this was something that I kind of pointed out to the students when they were doing their data analysis, and being like, hey, just so you're aware, this is developed for streams and rivers, but it in theory should still work for lakes,
Mm.
but it doesn't. It this year it spectacularly failed.
Oh
It
man.
basically ranked all of our lakes as being terrible. And we know they're not, because we use other indices that say actually they're
Mm.
fine. And
Mm.
between that and the water chemistry,
Mm.
we know that they're likely fine.
Mm.
So again, it kind of gets back into this complex thing where it's like the data that we have is saying this,
Mm.
but every other piece of data is saying that.
Mm.
Is what we're doing incorrect? And or is it pointing out something else? Because like the example that I use for work is with water chemistry, you're basically taking a snapshot. So there's one point in time that you're looking at that water as it existed in that spot at that
Mm.
date and time, right?
Mm.
Whereas with benthos, some of these invertebrates are living in the lake for years. So like dragonfly larvae, they live in the water. They live in there for like sometimes like 3 to 5 years. So they're
Mm.
constantly in contact with the water. So if there's something that's going to be impacting them, even if it's over a long period of time, so if there's like a small amount of something in the water, they're exposed to it every day.
Mm.
Over time, they can build up a concentration of this if it bioaccumulates, and
Mm-hmm.
then they can die, and then we don't see them. But if you took that one water sample,
Mm.
you might not necessarily see it because the concentrations are so small. So that's why we look at this and the water quality data, like the
Mm.
chemical data as well, because if they both say something's wrong, we know
Mm.
something's wrong.
Mm.
If one is saying something's wrong but the other isn't, maybe something's wrong and we should probably look into it further. So maybe we should test the water for more things. For example, the lake
Mm.
partner program that a lot of these lakes do through the MOE. I'm just going
Mm.
to call them that because I don't like the new name. The MOE uh, only measures phosphorus, dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, like very, very basic things. It doesn't measure for
Mm.
like metals or pesticides or other things,
Mm-hmm.
which they don't expect to see, which is why they don't measure for them, because it's usually just a waste of money because it says, no,
Mm.
you don't have any. Um, but it can miss that. But the
Mm.
benthics shouldn't, in theory. So that's kind of why
Mm.
we use both. But
Mm.
it's again, it's difficult because we have to objectively look at it and say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
are we getting these results because we're wrong,
Mm.
or is something actually wrong?
Mm.
So
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting, because that could mean a whole lot of things. That would it ultimately means more testing, more time
yes,
on the lake,
yes.
more data points.
Put me out on the lake. Get me out on a boat ASAP. I want to get out of my
Yeah,
house.
yeah. But that's to me, that's like, well, yeah, like I kind of miss boating actually. Just on
It's
the
fun.
aspects of like you point out a good point about like one we have to use multifaceted indicators to know if we're actually looking at the same thing or not, or we need
Mhm.
more. At my work, we have to not me, but I analyze some in the summer times. I have to analyze water samples and stuff,
Yep.
and to know that if there is any kind of like contamination, or just monitor even small ponds, even lakes, small ponds, to know if any kind of disruption from activities from my work.
Yep.
So that's like I just analyze the data. I don't do the interpretations and stuff. I just,
Hmm.
but I did but to me, data collecting and how you get the data is also very important too. Like
Yes.
yes, even though we know within a certain uh like a parameter where the data should fall into because of our previous years of testing,
Hmm.
but we also but there's also things that we don't know from the activities from my work, right? So
Yeah.
like we don't know. That's why we have to monitor it every single year to make sure that there's no impacts,
Yeah.
right? So but that's not my like I just analyze the data and stuff and see if it actually works, like if it actually works, and if not, then I will send it to further testing if there's any kind of discrepancies, or like swap in the data, or any kind of human error. Like there's a lot of factors, like human error from sampling, human
Yeah.
error from testing, human error from transportation. If there's air bubbles too, like I know that there's not a lot that it's not a huge aspect, but certain air bubbles over time can sway the results here and there and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think that that's you bring up a good point there, where it's like if we should monitor more, because like well, it's like having a
Yeah,
smoke
yeah,
detector in your home. Like
yeah.
I can tell when my house is on fire. Not when you're sleeping.
No.
You can't smell very well when you're sleeping, or you can't like consciously tap into
Mm.
that sense, right? So it's like
No.
in the lakes and in the mine, sometimes things happen and people don't sense them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, well, what about those times? Like that's still having an impact,
Mm-hmm.
and but we don't know about it. And I'd rather know
Mm.
about it so I can deal with it, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
just blindly thinking everything's okay until it's
Mm-hmm.
not,
No,
right?
just like you have to look at the data, and data is literally, to me, is 80% of the game. 20%, like how we collect our data, it's how we know. If there's no data, there's no interpretation.
No,
There's no data, there's no models. If
data
there's no
data is
data,
life.
data is king. Data can affect a lot of things, man.
Mm,
It affects policies. It affects everything. Like even look at COVID data and stuff. We used cases as one of the indicators for if we can open up the economy or not, right? So like data is like life, and in terms of COVID cases, it's literally life and death. It's
yeah,
literally life and death,
yeah,
and whether we like it or not, data, whether you think data is just a bunch of numbers or data is a human invention, but it's literally the backbone of science. With no data, no science.
exactly.
Hmm. Like we should, like, the efficacy of data. We should like in my opinion, we should have an analyst for policies in the government. Like let's go for, like, more broad and stuff. We should use data as a base point for any kind of policy, actually,
Hmm.
and better than, oh, if I'm right, or if I'm left, right? Like let's say, like, because let's agree on the data first, then we can get somewhere. Because if we don't agree on the data, we're not gonna get anywhere.
Yeah, I can understand that to a certain point. I don't think we should necessarily like convert everything to
Yeah,
that,
no.
because in instances like COVID,
Mm,
we start off knowing basically nothing.
mm,
Like we understand coronaviruses because we had SARS. We understand, and we've dealt with them in the past with like SARS, MERS,
mm,
and then in lab settings, like understanding what a coronavirus is.
mm,
But we don't necessarily know how we should react to this specific virus. So in instances
mm.
like that, it's that model kind of starts to fall apart a bit.
Yeah.
Um, the data that we do have is good to use in that situation, because it's like, okay, we
Mm-hmm.
know it's likely spread through the air, either
Mm-hmm.
through droplets or aerosols,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's somewhat airborne. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably on surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
So wash your hands. If
Mm-hmm.
you have a mask, you should probably wear it, but save them for the
Mm-hmm.
healthcare professionals because we don't have very many right now, like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So it's
Yeah.
like, I do agree with that, and I have been toying with the idea of potentially running for office at some point in the near future.
Oh,
So,
oh! You heard it first, guys. You heard it here first. Nowhere else.
um, but that is something that I think government should do more. Like I understand it is a kind of slow, cumbersome process in an
Mm,
already slow and cumbersome
country.
well, yeah, the government is not fast. If you've ever
Mm,
done anything with the federal government, especially,
no,
it is
it's
not a
slow.
fast organization.
Hmm.
Um,
But like
but
to be fair, our COVID response is actually considered fast in our government perspective eyes.
yes,
Actually.
yes, yes. I think getting later into the Ontario specific response, I think some of it
Mm,
was done a little bit not too fast, but just hastily. I think
mm,
is probably a good word for it, where it was just kind of done without much consideration for the
mm,
data and
mm.
for expert opinion.
We should
Um,
just get an expert panel, like just
we do. They don't listen to them.
Ah,
That's why they talk to CBC now, because the government does not listen to them. I'm talking
no.
specifically about the province.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
The feds, I think the feds are doing an okay job. I don't really
Mm,
have, I don't
I
like the
just,
liberals, but yeah.
mm, I wait. You don't like the liberals?
No.
Okay, okay, okay. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Well, like to
They're
me,
okay. They're okay.
mm-hmm,
Like I'm fine with them compared to the conservatives,
mm-hmm.
but like I
Fiscal
do not.
conservative or actual conservatives?
Like the Conservative Party of Canada and the Conservative Party of Ontario.
Okay.
I'm fine with fiscal conservatives. I am fairly fiscally conservative in my own personal life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
But like to me, it's just we need to find like I don't know. Like on the aspects of data, we should just keep finding more accurate data points and stuff. And like I don't know, just in terms of like, I feel like what's the future for you? Like in terms of data, like I know that you want to run for office, but can you
maybe.
can you give can you give more of a what should I say? Like specifically like what office? Like sorry, like Halliburton or like regional? Like
Here the right. I think actually I think nationwide, I think the ridings are the same between provincial and federal.
mm.
So I'm applying to be a candidate for one party at the moment.
Oh my gosh.
Federally, I
Oh my
need to
gosh.
complete the application. I've been dawdling on it for
Oh.
about a month now.
Mm.
But yeah, it's just I would like to get more involved in politics, considering I complain about it a lot and I vote, which is good. But I would like to get more involved because I
Mm.
think that people are not doing a good job and they could be doing a better job. So therefore, I
Well,
would like to do a better job myself.
in terms of that, as we mentioned before, politics is also a very complex system.
Yes.
And money, I feel like money is a one way to operate, to navigate in these complex systems and stuff. And it's just to me, it's very, what should I say, um, sad that we see a lot of too many stakeholders and too many like I've seen like there's way too many stakeholders in um determining any governmental process. That's what I've seen, but I'm not sure if you agree. Like, I'm not saying these are wrong stakeholders, but I'm just saying
Mm.
there's too many eggs and too many baskets for any proper decisions to be made per se.
I think I think that's just kind of the necessary evil of government, though,
Mm.
because if say for example you're an MP, so
Mm.
say I'm the MP for Halliburton, Cortha, Brock, which is my riding that I'm currently
Mm.
living in. Um, my duty is to look after my constituents,
Mm.
and this is a very broad area that
Mm.
incorporates a lot of different people who have a lot of different experiences. So there's people
Mm.
who live in Lindsay, and
Mm.
they're more of kind of an urban, rural place. There's people, and then there's people who live up in Halliburton who
Mm.
are very rural,
Mm.
and they have different challenges, right? So, and that even compounds when you're looking at the government as a whole. So for all the MPs, right,
Mm.
across Canada,
Mm.
they have to come somehow bring together and take it into account how their policy is going to impact people in St. John's or
Mm.
Vancouver
True.
and everywhere in between, right? So like
Mm.
I think that's just kind of necessary evil. I think the issue arises because we put a lot of value in less efficient places. I'll put it that way.
Mm. Oh,
Because well that's kind of the thing, right? Like with government lobbying and
mm-hmm.
stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily about the people anymore. The people are kind of their own stakeholder,
Mm.
and it's the people and the economy is kind of what it's boiled down to lately. So
Mm.
there's COVID has made that evidently clear in
Mm.
Ontario, especially. We are constantly at odds, apparently, with the choice where we have to make between human lives and businesses, which we have found out are very interlinked because, fun fact, people run businesses
Mm-hmm. You
and
can't
people
have
work
people.
at businesses.
You can't have a business without people.
Exactly. People are the ones that have the money, and they are the ones that spend the money to keep your
Mm-hmm.
business afloat.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we're going into a third lockdown now, despite the fact that we never recovered to I'll call it the
Lock.
January lockdown numbers
Mm.
in our ICUs and in overall COVID cases, new COVID
Mm.
cases per day, means that we probably left that too quickly,
Mm.
and didn't come into this next lockdown very quickly. So if we had,
Mm.
I think the idea is that if we had just done a better job at the beginning, like I'm getting into the specifics of COVID specifically
Mm.
now, but I think if people looked less at it from a monetary point of view and looked at more of what impacts the people the most, if you do that and your people are happy, people have have their needs met, the
Mm.
economy is going to be fine.
Mm.
Like if you are truly, Mr. Ford, if you are truly a free market capitalist, then you will understand that if people are able to
Mm-hmm.
spend money,
Mm.
they will spend money on the businesses that they want to, and the economy
Mm.
will do just fine.
Mm.
If people are stuck in their homes
Mm.
and don't know when this is going to end, they are less likely to spend money and they're more likely to save it.
And
So,
that explains the freaking housing boom in like southern Ontario and stuff,
yes,
and around Canada. Actually, that explains because you're not spending money on travel, you're not spending money on other things. Where the money's gonna go to? Living, because that's all you can spend money on.
yes.
Living, like
And you
food.
can work from home.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to live in downtown Toronto in a tiny
No.
condo anymore. You can live
No.
in a
Bigger home.
large 3 or 4 bedroom house in Halliburton or in
Mm.
PEI or in
Mm-hmm.
Alberta where housing prices are cheaper, and you can still telecommute in. You don't have to
Yeah.
drive into the office every day, right? So yeah,
Mm.
but yeah, I think as long my kind of core ideal is if you look after people, the
Mm.
economy will be fine. There are some times where like yeah, like if inflation is running rampant, yeah, we need
Mm-hmm.
like we need interest rates. We need
Mm-hmm.
to regulate interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, as long as you keep your people happy,
And
fed,
healthy.
housed,
Mm-hmm.
healthy, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
they will spend money. We
Mm-hmm.
have money in this country. It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to go away likely
Mm-hmm.
unless we really screw up.
Mm-hmm.
Like just focus on the people. Stop focusing on the money.
But that's very hard to do in the greater landscape of things. Like I do agree with you 100%, but it's very hard to do. Like I feel like it's very hard to balance that kind of mentality and mindset with everything else. That's my thing.
I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we don't properly run whatever jurisdiction we're talking about, federally, provincially, municipally, whatever. We don't run those typically like you would your personal finances. And part of that is
Mm.
just the name of the game. It is
Mm-hmm.
not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in good times, you tax people more so that you
Mm.
have money to spend on
Mm.
the bad times as an emergency fund, which everyone
Mm.
is, especially nowadays, very familiar with if they're in any financial circles whatsoever.
Mm. Have emergency
Um,
funds.
yes, have your rainy day fund. So when you're out of a job because of a
Mm-hmm.
global pandemic, you
Mm-hmm.
can at least hang on until the government gets their act together. You don't have to like
Mm.
instantly default on your loans and lose your apartment and not be
Mm.
able to feed yourself as soon as you
Mm.
lose your job, right? Like
Mm.
the government should run like that as well. But typically, what happens is we just see the government comes in, they promise tax cuts because people don't necessarily like paying taxes.
Mm.
I don't either, but it's part.
Me
I like
neither. Me
I like
neither.
roads. I like
Yeah.
hospitals. I would
Yeah.
like to continue seeing and using those things so that I can be a
Mm.
healthy individual. But
Mm.
it's like if if things are going well,
Mm.
and I understand in this current context
It's hard to.
it was hard because we're just kind of coming off the back of 2008, right? So like
Mm.
that's why interest rates were initially low and they didn't really get raised that
Mm.
much until
Mm.
we had to lower them again. So like I understand that that is a
Dude, and the
difficulty.
interest rates for housing is so low. Like last year was like
It's
one
ridiculous.
point something, on top like prime, but
Yeah.
on top of whatever you want, which is so low, which is like a bargain. You that shows to me that in a pandemic you can still have a booming economy in a if you know where the money is going.
Yeah.
Because now
Yeah.
look at Toronto. Like people are like escaping Toronto because everyone's working at home. Like, not, I don't want to say escaping, like exodusing out of
Yeah.
Toronto, to go into other like smaller cities or towns, and that exponentially, not exponentially, but like will in turn raising the average housing prices of that community and stuff.
Yeah.
And that cycle just goes on and on and on and on. And to me, that's very interesting because that shows that we have the spending power. It just
Yep.
it's like that. Sorry, from that data that I'm looking at from the housing market and stuff. If you want to agree, like say that if the housing market, it's not it's still booming, but despite a pandemic, that means that during a pandemic the economy is not going to slow down as much as we think when we
Mm-hmm.
have other things that can boost it up during a pandemic.
Yeah. Now this is a different financial crisis than the
Yes,
one we
yes.
experienced in
Mm-hmm.
2008, 2009, obviously, because
Mm-hmm.
that
Yes,
had a
yes.
different trigger.
Yeah.
But it is kind of similar because we also did see similar things in 08, 09,
Mm-hmm.
where the people who were less impacted by it basically spent the same amount or more
Mm.
because a lot of people, especially for investing,
Mm.
and like stocks and stuff,
Oh
oh
yeah,
eight
the
oh
stock is
nine was a great time to start investing because everything was basically half
low.
off. Everything
Yeah,
was on
low.
sale,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
So then you always kind of get these two sides, and it's a good thing and it's also a bad thing
Mm.
because the people who have the money are the
Mm.
ones that are going to be spending it. So the people who
Mm-hmm.
have the cash to splash for these now $1 million homes up where I live, which is absolutely ridiculous for
What?
what you're getting.
What?
Yep.
$1 million home, like cottage homes, or just actual like resident homes and stuff. Like,
Both.
oh god. Well,
I mean,
I heard.
the cottages have
Yeah,
always been expensive.
yeah, yeah, for sure,
That's
for
not a new
sure.
thing.
Yeah.
But
Same thing in Barrie. Gone up
yeah,
like at least 30 to 40% in housing prices the
that is
last year.
ridiculous.
Yeah. So like,
Ah.
so the home that I bought, increased from increased like let's say if I want to let's say if I want to sell now, I would like even though I bought last year, I would probably make over 100K just from the
That is insane.
like riding the wave of the boom, right? But the question is, it's easy to sell, but is it hard? It's hard to buy.
It is very
That's a
hard to buy.
yeah. Cause like let's say the house prices is like 500,000, the actual selling price that's being sold after the bidding war is for like it's $100,000 more. So you're gonna get like on top of the raising house prices, you're getting the bidding war on top of that. That's
Yep.
to me is insane. That to
Yeah.
me is absolutely insane.
It is.
Like
It is absolutely
like
ridiculous.
I'm comfortable with housing prices rising like 2 to 3% every year, even 5%, right? Like that's a natural
Yeah.
appreciation of homes.
Yeah.
Fine, normal, right? But 30% to 40%,
It's
that's
ridiculous.
over like a third of your value. Just 25% just went up within less than a year, which to
Yeah.
me was ridiculous. And that's when I was like, data point matters.
Yes. Oh yeah, economists will agree with you on that one. They're definitely in the camp of data. I mean, I guess everyone is nowadays, right?
Mm,
Like even look at like Facebook and
mm,
the rise of big data, right?
mm-hmm,
Like that data is extremely important in pretty
mm-hmm,
much everything.
mm-hmm.
We're very analytically minded species. So if
100%
if
agree.
it yeah, it's important for us to collect data.
And like this shows like the more data we have, like that's to me that just shows we're like a species of like exploration and new things and stuff. And
Yeah.
eventually that will like comes down to like you running for president. Eventually. And if we're like, no, do we need another Biden or do we need another Trump? Let's just
Oh
see how
no.
that goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my ultimate goal is I'm using my American fiance to get into America so I can eventually become president. We need to be
Oh.
born in America in order to be
Oh.
president. That is a requirement.
Oh,
Yes.
really? Oh, like she
Yes.
can she have way
She could be
more.
president.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Interesting. But okay. So there's no way you can be president in the States,
Nope.
but you can be president. I'm sorry, prime minister or an MP here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say prime minister.
And
Prime minister.
Rachel could also be either any of those as long as she becomes a citizen.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
It's a different form of government. So it's it's
Mm.
it's in the States it's kind of a safeguard in order to make sure that a foreign power doesn't get the
Influence. Let's say.
yeah, well, because the president is very powerful in America compared
Mm.
to the prime minister in Canada. Like the prime minister still has power, but
Not the same
it's
power.
it's a different kind of power. Yeah, so they're the
Mm.
leader of their party and they're the leader of the country, but
Mm.
they don't necessarily get all the same roles and responsibilities that a president would in the U.S. So we're not a republic; we're
Mm.
a commonwealth. So
Yeah. Commonwealth. But in a sense that we're still part of the British Commonwealth.
yeah, yes,
Mhm.
yes, yeah.
But do you think that us is the Queen still has power over us?
She is our head of
Even
state. Yes.
so, if she's like, oh, let's boot out Trudeau, can she actually do that or no? Like
No.
take a prime minister.
No.
Oh.
I think technically she can, but that hasn't been done in the
Mhm.
UK for centuries.
Oh, okay. It's still within
So
her bound of power, but
yeah,
it's not something that's typically done.
if that were to happen,
Mm-hmm.
it would just be like, no,
No.
no, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, sure.
She's more of a ceremonial figurehead. Like the British monarchy has basically just become
Mm.
ceremonial. So
R.I.P. Prince Philip. Like,
Yes.
yes, R.I.P. Prince Philip. Like, just
Yeah.
rest in peace and stuff. And
Yep.
Biden's getting there too. Oh my God, Biden looks so old. Like he looks
R.I.P.
like
R.I.P. Biden.
R.I.P. Biden. Let's make a hashtag and then just fake news the shit out of
Oh
it.
no. We're gonna get put on so many watch lists.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Maybe we're putting on a watch list right now and stuff. Who knows?
Probably. I'm sure I'm on a couple of US watch lists.
Really?
I mean, yeah, they track everyone. So
They track
that's not even a conspiracy theory. That's just fact now.
It used to
Thanks,
be.
Jordan.
It used to be. Like before Snowden, it's like, oh, big brother watching us. Oh, tinfoil hat people. And now after Snowden and like WikiLeaks, there's no doubt about that kind of stuff. Like it's common knowledge and stuff now. So by now, oh, but I'm very hoping that you would actually become an MP or like run for some kind of party. I'm willing to join you in your request if you actually get that far. I'm down with it because like I like working with like not that we ever worked together, but
Yeah.
wait, we have volunteered together.
Yeah, we volunteer. That counts as working.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
Relevant experience.
relevant experience working together, and I feel like we should like I will support you till the end, Peyton.
Oh, thank you.
And on that note, I think this is the end of our podcast. Thank you very much for a second appearance from Brandon Martin. I really appreciate that. He's one of my favorite conservationists and one of the person that I really like to talking to. Do you have anything else to say, Beaton?
Nope. Just thanks for having me on again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Please see the next episode. Peace. Bye. Like and subscribe too. Okay, bye.